That time once again. Welcome to a brand new episode of the Will You Stop podcast. I am Brandon, joined as always with Avi. Avi's been telling me he's got something to call me out on this week, and he's kept it shrouded in a mystery. So I guess it's time for the mystery to be revealed, and hopefully it'll be a better mystery than who attacked Roman Reigns last night. So what's up, Bob? What's going on?
Not much. The month of July is over, and I was thinking about it. Meltzer brought this up. Brian Alvarez brought this up, and this is probably the worst month WWE has had on every level in recent memory. Creatively, in-ring work, everything has just been a mess. If you look at it from the point of view of your angles, I mean, your big angle on SmackDown is a reboot of an angle from 20 years ago, and not a good one at that. The original is not going to get touched in this one. Most reboots suck. This is a bad reboot. You got Samoa Joe and Reigns in a feud now, which is good, but I don't know what they're feuding about. Maybe somebody can explain that to me. You got Seth Rollins and Brock Lesnar feuding in a feud nobody cared for to begin with, and now people are making a big deal over the fact that Brock Lesnar beat up Seth Rollins. So your heel world champion, before a major pay-per-view, jumped and beat up the face challenger, because that's never happened in the history of wrestling before, I assume.
Never. It's never happened. Are you kidding me? That's groundbreaking. It's first time ever.
And, you know, the crowds have been dead. I mean, a couple of months ago, you blamed the live crowd for being dead. What's your take on it now? Because honestly, I haven't heard a live crowd in I don't even know how long at this point.
First off, that was talking specifically about one crowd. I believe it was Lafayette. I believe that was the Raw. And even your God Meltzer was talking how dead that crowd was. But the problem WWE has now brought themselves into, and I think last week they actually hopefully have seen it, is the fact that their past stars got more of a reaction than their current crop of stars do. And if that's not an eye-opener to how bad they've taken these guys and fucked them up, I don't know what is.
You know, but here's my whole take on that. You've always claimed that if we get them off script and let them do what they did during Attitude and be themselves, it'll make a difference. They are themselves on Twitter. Rollins is a fucking tool. I don't know if it's an act and he's just trying to annoy people, or if that's really him. They got to keep him scripted because the guy's a fucking tool. The stuff he says is so ridiculous and so asinine, he honestly sounds like a drunk frat boy just trying to piss off one of his friends. I mean, his Twitter stuff is ridiculous.
I think the stuff with Ospreay was a work. I think they were just working people. And I think he honestly believes WWE is that good. I honestly believe he believes that. So him defending WWE, I kind of get it. It's you're working someplace for 8 years. You're going to defend it no matter how bad it is.
But here's my thing. You can defend it as the standard bearer in sports entertainment. You're correct. You could defend it that it makes the most money and is the most popular federation in the history of the business. You'd be correct. Don't start talking shit about the in-ring stuff. Even John Cena would never go off about the in-ring stuff. He would discuss money, profit, etc., popularity. Nobody in WWE has a right to discuss the in-ring work of the WWE, especially compared to New Japan. WWE has never, ever, ever been the standard bearer of in-ring work in the professional wrestling industry.
Fully agree. They're not. They have not changed their style in God knows how long, how many years. The slow plotting style. I agree with you.
That's where I'm going to go with this. And I've been saving this up, and this is where I'm going to have to just come after you. WWE in 2008, when they went PG, they got a disease. It's now 2019, 11 years later. They're in the hospice now. This disease has eaten away at its insides, has killed the product, and they are in a hospice. And I'm going to say it. The wheels have fallen off. And for weeks now, I've been asking you, have the wheels fallen off? And you either A, have not given an answer, or B, have given a half-ass answer. Now, before you get into it, you and a lot of your WWE Universe marks have been saying, well, WWE's been down before. Let me explain something to you. You can look at the time period, I'd say, from, King of the Ring 93 till, I don't know, I want to say Survivor Series 95 as a down period in WWE, about a year and a half. Then they bounced back with when New Generation kind of found itself, basically taking the title off of Diesel and giving it to Hart. They had another down period, and I wouldn't even really call this a down period because when you watch it, that time period of, say, June of 96 till, I want to say after WrestleMania 13 when Austin was off and running as your down period, you're basically talking less than a year. It was really down. But it wasn't so much down as just WCW had the hot angle with the NWO and it was that much better. This is 11 years. 11 years that this product has gotten progressively worse. You've had little ebbs and flows where you had your Summer of Punk. You had your Yes movement. And those things maybe brought the fans up for a little bit. The return of Brock Lesnar. Again, the fans came out for a little bit. But this has been a slow, dying death. And I'm going to say right now, the wheels have fallen off the WWE bus. It can't get any worse. You have no real angles. Your only 3 to 4 angles you have going is a reboot of an angle from 20 years ago, the continuation of a feud nobody wants to see for the title from 3 months ago, Reigns and Joe fighting for no reason. Their matches could be good. It is what it is. And I'm sure there's another feud in there if we really tried hard enough to find one. You're going into SummerSlam right now. SummerSlam arguably is right up there at WrestleMania. I've always felt that way. SummerSlam, some years, has blown away WrestleMania. I can give you a list of SummerSlams that are better than WrestleMania. SummerSlam is a huge event. This is turning out to be an absolute garbage card. I can't see the booking getting any worse. I can't see creative getting any worse. I can't see the in-ring work getting any worse. So I have to say the wheels have fallen off this bus. And if you guys are looking for a savior, there's nothing in NXT that's going to save this product. Velveteen Dream is not coming up to save the day. Okay? Gargano is not coming up to save the day. And now you got AEW coming up on Wednesday nights in October. And now the latest thing I heard is Vince wants to put together a hybrid show featuring NXT and 205 Live guys. Okay, if they're allowed to actually work and don't have to follow this WWE style, some people will watch it. But at this point, I'm going to say it, the wheels have fallen off the bus. And I've asked you repeatedly, have the wheels fallen off? It's time for you to finally give an answer.
Okay, well, explain to our listeners what exactly you mean by the wheels fall off. You're saying, to me, when someone says the wheels have fallen off, it means it's unfixable, it's broken, there's no chance. You're using an analogy of being on hospice. You're basically saying that WWE is close to death.
In its current form, absolutely, it's close to death. The form that it's in right now cannot sustain much longer. It can't. Your viewership now is down almost 30% since November. November. That's roughly, what, 8 months?
Yeah, give or take. Yeah,
Give or
something
take
like that.
In the last 7-8 months, your viewership is down 30%. And remember, viewership suffers in the summer greatly. A lot of kids are away at camp. A lot of kids are doing things. People are traveling. I can't even imagine what the viewership is down by September. In the history of WWE, they've never taken a 30% drop-off viewership-wise. Look at the ratings. At your worst days of the war, the lowest rating WWE ever got was a 1.9. They were averaging a 2.2 at that point. That's not a 30% drop-off. That's a tremendous drop-off. As a matter of fact, I was listening to Meltzer today, and they were discussing how I think it was from this time last year, this is back around April or May, that in the past year, overall viewership, overall subscriptions to WWE Network, and overall merchandise sales across the board, the entire product is down almost 25%. So yeah, in its current form, the WWE, the wheels are falling off. They're in the hospice. They are dead and buried. This current form cannot sustain any longer. So once again, I ask you, have the wheels fallen off? It's time for you to answer this question finally.
First off, I have answered. You may not have liked the answer you heard, and you may have, it went to that the classic line of, I'm a WWE mark.
Well, let's look at your answer you gave. You said, yes, I believe they can come back. Where is your evidence they can come back?
You can't have evidence until it's actually there. They're starting to make
downhill for 11 years.
All under the auspices of Mr. McMahon, correct? Of Vince McMahon? And now that Vince...
Look at NXT. Look at NXT over the last 2 years. It's been a shit show.
Yeah, NXT has gone down. It isn't where it was back 2-3 years ago, but because every time that Triple H has built someone up, Vince has taken them to the main roster and fucked them royally in the ass, like this is an episode of Oz.
So what do you want to do? You want to keep guys in NXT forever? The whole point is that it's a developmental system. You're going to bring guys up eventually.
We have both discussed this in the past. You agreed with me that, or I agreed with you, I should say. I'll give credit where credit is due, that some guys just aren't made for the main roster and should stay in NXT.
All right, but if they're taken out of NXT and the NXT product can't sustain itself, then shit, you're not a good product then.
NXT, even with a bad roster, is still better than WWE's main roster. When you have those back-to-back shows on pay-per-view weekends, the NXT show is always, from an in-ring standpoint alone, is always so much better than the WWE product.
So is every other federation out there. No one's ever going to deny that.
As far as the wheels falling off the bus...
Give me a major federation right now whose in-ring work is not better than WWE. New Japan is better. AEW is better. MLW is better. Impact is better. That's not saying much, just saying that NXT's in-ring work is better than WWE. I'm going to ask the question again. You're still not answering it. Have the wheels fallen off?
I don't think the wheels are falling off. That's what the same answer I gave you weeks ago when you and
so this current status can sustain itself.
WWE has the funds and the way to keep going.
No. Can the current status of the product sustain itself? You're down 30% in viewership. Can it sustain itself?
No, it can't. No. If the viewership keeps dropping, it will not sustain itself. It will.
The wheels falling off. Can it get worse? That's the better question.
Oh, it definitely. Well, they're proving it every week it can get worse. But in hindsight, no, it can't get much worse than the way things have been in July. If we're looking at this past month and we're looking just at July, there's no way August can be any worse than July has been. July has been complete garbage. They have not produced a single minute of television that was compelling or anything that was even, in my opinion, entertaining.
When was the last time you saw something compelling or entertaining in WWE, period?
I would honestly have to go back and look. I can't think of something off the top of my head. The only thing that they have right now is Bray Wyatt. That's the only thing I found entertaining and appealing.
You look at the current product for where it is right now. Your live crowds are dead. Your at-home crowd is struggling to stay awake. Your creativity is non-existent. Your in-ring work is sloppy as fuck, and we'll get into that in a few minutes. Okay? Every week we got Botchmania, volumes 1 through 20. Nothing you're doing is making any sense, and I'll say it again, the wheels have fallen off. It can't get any worse from a creative standpoint. Even the in-ring work, I'm going to be honest, it can't get much worse. It's embarrassing sometimes how bad the in-ring work is. At this point, even you have to agree, the wheels have fallen off. We have hit rock bottom as far as WWE goes. The current product, the way it stands, the way it is very reminiscent of the way things were late in '96 when it became apparent that WWE had to change or it was going to be in big trouble. And right now we're back there again. This product has got to change. And it's got to change on a lot of fronts. Creative's got to change their entire approach to the entire product. The talent has got to get the crowd going, get in that ring, and actually put on a good fucking match. Stop slipping up. Stop at the botches. Stop trying so hard where you're falling all over yourselves. I mean, some of these matches are just embarrassing sometimes. You got to redo the commentary crew. Honestly, Renee Young, I've had it with her. Listening to her is painful.
It's like nails against the board.
You know, her and Corey Graves, I swear to God, it's like the two 12-year-olds sitting in the back of a bio class with the inside joke about the teacher. You need a top-to-bottom, complete restructuring of this entire product for this to actually become viable. Because right now, you're losing viewership. I can't stand to watch it anymore at this point. I just do it just to keep up. There's nothing enjoyable about it. I'm not looking forward to SummerSlam. Ziggler versus Goldberg now we're hearing? Are you kidding me?
Nah, well, I'm going to read it for you. The official card that they have so far. First off, they announced that it's Miz and Dolph. Unless I think Meltzer says that's a red herring. I don't know if it was Meltzer. I won't say it's Meltzer. I read someone on Twitter say that this match is a red herring. Okay, you got Trish against Charlotte Flair. Miz against...
I get they're in Toronto, but seriously, come on.
You got Miz against Dolph. You know, that says itself what that's going to be. AJ against Ricochet. You got Finn Balor against Bray Wyatt. Kevin Owens against Shane. Kofi against Randy Orton. Bayley against Ember Moon. Becky Lynch against Natalya. And then Brock against Seth.
Okay. And you give me one match that honestly is going to be good.
I could see two matches putting on a decent showing. I could see the AJ Ricochet match being decent, and I could see Kofi against Randy Orton being decent. Every other match in that card is complete horseshit and complete garbage.
Let's be honest. I mean, when was the last time they gave us a pay-per-view that wasn't horseshit? That was actually full of matches that we actually wanted to see?
Not for a long time. And I think that's part of the reason why you're seeing a creative change. I mean, let's be real. It wasn't going to happen overnight.
But honestly, what has changed?
Nothing yet.
What's the holdup?
Yeah. Again, things can't happen, aren't going to exactly happen overnight. I mean, you slowly see some of the Paul Heyman ideas.
Why? Because
horrible.
You said vagina?
Please. I don't even want to get into that because we know who said that, and he's hooked up on that, and that is the stupidest thing I ever heard. But no, that's not what I mean. I don't mean because they use the word vagina. Okay?
Listen, I have to start somewhere, and nothing has started yet. I see no difference from week to week. What exactly is the difference?
Let's start with Raw. First off, the whole thing with Maria and Mike is Heyman, and I'm sorry, that is horrible. That is stupid. It makes no sense why she's involved in a major storyline. You put a 24/7 title, which has become a comedy title, which is fine. It's giving us R-Truth and the Drake Maverick stuff, which is entertaining to a degree until they overkill it. Then it gets annoying. But now you're putting a title on a pregnant woman who no one's going to touch. So what are you going to do? You're going to do the same thing you did with the DiBiase thing, have it happen off screen? Why she's involved in storylines right now, why they even offered them a 5-year deal, I have no idea.
Well, you just said, things take time to change, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, but things have to start to change. I see nothing that has started. I see more stupidity. If anything, things have gotten dumber. You had that gauntlet match on SmackDown. What was the purpose of that?
What you mean the one on Raw with
the one on SmackDown.
This past week they had
Mysterio and everybody else.
Yeah, that was on Raw. That was for the number one contender for AJ's U.S. title.
You really didn't need that.
I agree you didn't need it.
I mean, the Usos are all over the place now.
Usos are lucky they're freaking not locked up, but that's a whole that's a whole different story right there.
The product is all over the place. I mean, people talking about Heyman doing this and Bischoff doing that, and I mean, honestly, nothing has changed. It's the same shit, different day. And unless there's a major, and this has to be a major change, top to bottom. And Vince has already said he's not going to go away from PG. And now, from what I understand, Vince is putting word out to the advertisers and to the people at Turner saying AEW is going to be full of blood and guts. Watch out for them. And it's like, okay, great. So your product's going to suck. Take everyone else with you.
I think, one of the things Vince said was on that call last week was that we're not going to be blood and guts like AEW is. First off, I think Vince needs to slow his roll a little bit. They had a hardcore match with some blood, and they had an accidental, Cody getting busted open by accident. It's not exactly a blood and...
Vince did that to fuck with the advertisers. He did it where advertisers are going to say, oh, wait, they're blood and guts? Wait a minute now. That's why Vince did that.
I agree.
That's normal business practice. But at the end of the day, you know what? You're going to sit here and tell me the wheels haven't fallen off. It can't get much worse. And you're going to tell me that things have been improving. Nothing has improved. Nothing has changed. We're literally watching. If I went into a coma 2 years ago and threw on Raw, what would really be different?
You know what? I'll concede to that. Nothing. Yeah, it goes back to what we've discussed in the past before, where there's no individual characters. Everyone is the cookie cutter. Everyone is the same character, same look. I mean, if you put Drew, Roman, and Seth in a lightly lit room, would you honestly be able to tell the difference between them?
Yeah, it's true. But you know what? It's when you look back, I remember when WWE first went PG. Me and you didn't really think it was that big of a deal. We kind of blew it off, I'll be honest with you, because I don't think me and you understood what that actually was going to mean. And the transition to PG was basically overnight, if you remember. I remember like they had a pay-per-view, blood and guts all over the place. Next day they're going PG, and all of a sudden the whole product changed. And it was funny because at first I think me and you were kind of like, yeah, what's the big deal? We went through the golden era of the 80s and early 90s. We went through New Generation, not a big deal. And PG didn't have to be a big deal. Honestly, you've had different eras that were PG. But since 2008, when they went to a complete NXT roster for the most part, except for AJ Styles really, it's gotten worse and worse and worse. And we're at the point now where, it's been a steady 11-year drop-off, where every year the ratings have gotten lower, viewership has gotten lower, and to be honest with you, the creative and the in-ring work has gotten worse and worse. When have you ever seen such dirty matches in the history of this company?
No, the mess-ups, the missed spots, the botches, it's become a daily occurrence in WWE's in-ring product, and it's just become horrible, and it exposes the business. It makes things... I get kayfabe is dead, but you don't need to broadcast that it's dead. Everyone knows wrestling is predetermined, but you don't need to throw it in everyone's face by showing them how bad things are.
You know what's funny about that? Listen, kayfabe died back in the late 80s, early 90s. We knew what it was. We knew what was going on. But that never took away from it for us. And I don't think any real wrestling fan ever lost the ability to watch it and not give a shit about the outside occurrences and this, that, and the third. We know it's predetermined. We know these guys are talking during the matches. We've gone to enough live shows to see what goes on behind the scenes. We've talked to enough wrestlers. We get it. But it's never bothered us. We still watch like we're watching it at 10 years old again. We still want to look forward to pay-per-view matches. We still want to look forward to blow-offs. So the lack of kayfabe, that really never bothered... I don't think any real fan was ever bothered by it. In a sense, I think that when 2 guys are in there or 4 guys are in there in a tag team match, or whatever the case may be, if they're putting on a good enough show and you believe in those characters, kayfabe doesn't matter anymore. And it's up to the characters to drag us into it. And that's another thing we're not getting from this roster. You know, we talk about the dead crowds. Listen, creative obviously plays a role in it by giving the crowd something to cheer about. But you know what? Those guys got to get in there, and they got to give us a show worth watching. And we're not getting that. A lot of times it really seems like these guys are half-assing it in the ring.
There's no stories. There's nothing to pull the audience in for the wrestlers to walk the audience through the story, because the stories are so bad. It's literally, I could turn the lights there. That's how good. That's what we're seeing. There's nothing there to see. It's like walking around in a dark room.
But you know what, though? We've been there, done that, though. Think about it. Back in 96, when WCW was really kicking ass with the NWO, and WWE, kind of like today, realized they got to change their product because that product was dead. And they did. They started Attitude at that point. But I'd say from June of 96 till probably right after WrestleMania 13, which is when Attitude started really, to kind of kick off, I mean, WWE was really in a bad spot, similar to the way it is right now. But back then, you were getting crowd reactions. Austin was getting those reactions. Michaels was getting reactions. Hart was getting reactions. The crowd was the product.
They weren't the same guy. They weren't the same guy with the long hair, dark beard. Austin was...
I get what you're saying, but you know what, though? Back then, you weren't getting great angles for that time period where WWE was really getting... Think about it. WCW has the NWO. They have the Luchas. They got DDP doing his stuff. You know, it's they were kicking the crap out of WWE on every level. As a matter of fact, I mean, even ECW was blowing away WWE by far and away. WWE at one point really had nothing going for it, if you think about it. You look at that time period after WrestleMania 12, Hart disappears. Austin really hasn't come into his own yet. Michaels is fighting against Vader at SummerSlam. You know, Sid is kind of lingering around in the background.
Playing softball. What are you talking about? Softball season.
Right. And I mean, you really had no angles. And then slowly things started to come back. Austin gets back. I mean, Bret Hart gets back, starts feuding with Austin. Michaels and Sid start the feud. So things started to pick up. But there was a moment there where you literally had nothing going on. And then all of a sudden they found out about Mankind. They bought some, things started to pick up, especially once they discovered Attitude, a.k.a. ECW. But, you were still getting crowd reactions. I mean, the crowds are just... You know what the crowd reminds me of lately? Like, honestly, it's almost like watching a really bad basketball team in the middle of a season, and they're down by 30 points in the first half. It's just the crowd is dead. From what I understand, MSG is not even close to selling out for Raw or SmackDown, that they're at the point now where they're actually going to drop prices on tickets for the first time ever for an MSG show in WWE. WWE has dropped ticket prices in certain places. They've never dropped prices at MSG. They may actually, word as I heard, they might be doing the 2-for-1 deal at MSG of all places.
Yeah, they were just doing that at Philly.
Huh?
I said they just did that at Philly. They were actually selling 4-packs for Extreme Rules.
So think about that. Philly, New York, that's like the mainstays of the WWE territory from 50 years ago. Always their biggest houses was the Philly, New York house. SmackDown and Raw aren't even close to a sellout. Meanwhile, Ring of Honor and New Japan run a random show in April and sell out the Garden with no problem. That's problematic. And I'm really curious to see how AEW does for their first show. I have to assume their first show is going to sell out. I think the real test for AEW is going to be, does their 10th show sell out? Does their 15th show sell out? How does that 28th show look? In 2 years from now, how their show is looking. Because that first show, it's in DC. That's a relatively hot wrestling market. Always has been. Remember, that's the Baltimore, DC, Mid-Atlantic area.
Virginia,
That's always been a hot wrestling market. They've had Survivor Series down there. They've had SummerSlam down there. They've had Great American Bash down there. They've had Starrcade down there. They've had countless Raws and SmackDowns down there. So that's always been, Nitro's obviously been down there. That's always been a hot market as far as wrestling goes. That's the original territory for Capital Wrestling when WWE first started in the 60s. That's they're doing the TV tapings from. So I'm not worried about them selling out over there, but I want to see how hot that crowd is also. Now, if the crowd isn't hot for AEW, which I can't see how, but let's just say that crowd's not hot, then maybe we've gone the way of Japan when it comes to wrestling for all we know. But I mean, I was watching a Raw from 1999. I was bored. I threw on a random Raw. I literally just went on the network and just said, I'm going to throw on a random Raw. I think I threw on a Raw from like, I don't even know. It was probably from like April or May of 99. Holy shit, man. That crowd was hot from beginning to end. You had a match where I think it was like Al Snow versus the Road Dogg. And the crowd was popping for that match. I mean, think about that. Al Snow and the Road Dogg. They're in like the third match of the night out of 8 matches, 9 matches, whatever it was. And the crowd was popping for that. As a matter of fact, the crowd popped for every freaking thing that happened on that card.
And again, to me, that goes back to how the characters are treated, how they're cultivated, they're given the proper storylines to work with, and uses those storylines and uses themselves to advance the storylines and create something. If you're not given anything to create with, you're not even given chicken shit at this point to create chicken salad. It's like the stuff's not even put together yet.
You know what it is? But here's the thing. Maybe it's gotten to a point. Remember, we're not backstage. We're not in those meetings. You know, is it possible if Vince and his guys are talking to each other and saying, listen, maybe there's a lot of these guys we just can't trust to go off script because you know what? They're letting Kevin Owens go off script. They let Sami Zayn, when he was doing his shtick, go off script. So there's certain guys they allowed to kind of run with it. Listen, look at Seth Rollins. I mean, honestly, with the shit he's putting out there on Twitter, I wouldn't let this guy off script if he paid me to.
See, the Twitter thing always gets me because it's like, is it them or is it someone from WWE writing for them? Because I've heard stories how, you know, you have to give your Ryback, I think, on his podcast actually said that WWE asked people to give them their passwords and usernames for Twitter. So it's like, how much is, like, the stuff when Becky would go back and forth with whomever or with Ronda? How much was that actually Becky sitting there at her laptop, or is that someone in WWE Creative coming up with something?
Listen, I agree. We're obviously not going to know unless somebody actually tells us. But by the same token, it's almost like, you know, like I said before, the wheels have fallen off. This product is going to have to change. That is the bottom line. We've seen it in this position before. We saw this, you know, at the beginning of New Generation. We saw this before it became Attitude. We've seen it where we've said, where, you know, even Vince has got to realize the in-ring has got to change first and foremost. You know, it's, if you can't come up with any good angles for whatever reason because you're trying to toe that line of, you know, PG or whatnot, I'm fine with that. But you're getting to a point now where at least make the matches good. I mean, holy shit, some of these matches are so piss poor, it almost puts you into tears.
Do you think there's a possibility that investors and people from the board of directors could oust Vince as the head of creative if things don't change?
No, he has full control over the company at all times. You know, but I think, listen, the XFL may turn out to be a blessing, where he gets so busy with the XFL that he puts somebody else in charge. Now, here's my thing. He brings in Paul Heyman. He brings in Eric Bischoff. You don't hear a peep about Triple H. Is that Vince's way of saying he doesn't think Triple H can handle that kind of load?
I think it's a matter of not that Triple H can't handle the load, but Triple H has so much on his plate between NXT and his other responsibilities in, you know, upper management that to put him in charge of that would just stretch him too thin.
You know what? You say that, but here's my issue also with Triple H. I watch NXT, and I agree with the business model of keep it simple. I've always kind of agreed with that. I feel like NXT sometimes is almost too simple. I feel like wrestling has evolved to the point where you kind of can't insult the fans' intelligence anymore. You know what I'm saying? You kind of gotta say, okay, here it is. Let me give this to you. And I feel like Triple H lacks that sometimes. I feel like the angles in NXT are a little childish at times.
Childish in what sense? Like, give me an example. What do you mean by childish?
A perfect example. Ciampa and Gargano have this blood feud, and then they kiss and make up. Like, come on, man. Don't insult us like that.
Yeah, I agree. The going back to them being a tag team, and I get that, Ciampa's injury, derailed whatever storyline they were going on, but they should never have gone back. That should have led up to your first NXT Hell in a Cell match. That should have.
That's the stuff I mean where Triple H gets a little childish sometimes. Like, guys are going to feud that hard and then become besties? Come on.
And then it goes back to what I said. Yeah, we, as hardcore wrestling fans, lifelong wrestling fans, we can suspend that disbelief. We know there's no kayfabe. We know these guys are buddies. We know they're not really in a blood feud and all that stuff. They're best friends, whatever. But don't have them just come out and hug each other and pull back the curtain like that. Especially then when you want, assuming Ciampa comes back at the right stage where he wants to come back and you're going to have them feud again. You just had them a few months ago hugging on stage, raging each other's hands when Gargano won the title. Then they're going to have a blood feud. But come on. I'm going to go with what you're saying. Yeah, it is insulting fans' intelligence, and it makes it a little too neat with a bow tie. And you can't always have neat. Sometimes you have a little dirty.
Yeah, it's just I find that his booking is a little childish. Listen, it could change over time, but right now, like I said, the wheels have fallen off. This product as it stands right now cannot sustain. It is a dead product. It is a product of the past. And fans today are going to let Vince know real quick, probably starting on October 3rd, and they're going to be real loud about it, that we do not want this anymore. This is what we want. Okay? October 2nd, I believe, at 8 o'clock is when AEW kicks off.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? I'll tell you right now, by October 3rd, Vince will know exactly where the fans are at. Because I'm going to call right now, that show, there's no way it's not going to break the 3.0, not higher.
Now, don't you think we're looking at a different situation than like when it was Raw versus Nitro, in the fact that there's no show going head-to-head, so there isn't going to be a matter of like split viewers and things of that sort? Not saying that it's going to be
it certainly will be if the AEW product is that much better. If you're losing viewership without a competitor, imagine what happens when a competitor comes along.
Yeah, but my whole point is just that because of the different day, it's different than like when it's head-to-head. Like if AEW was starting on the Monday opposite of Raw, then, we're going to see where the, that line is drawn. But because you don't really have to, quote unquote choose between WWE and AEW, I mean, yeah, is that going to be like a fair assessment is what I'm trying to say, because there's no
one's watching Raw on Monday and everyone's watching AEW on Wednesday. That's a pretty easy assessment to make.
And what show do you go by? Do you go by obviously their first show is going to be much higher than every other show is going to be because it's the first show. Same way like you were saying before, it's going to sell out because it's the first show. It's history making, all that stuff.
If a year from now they're pulling better ratings than Raw, you have your answer.
I think a month from now. I don't even think you got to wait that long.
Well, we have to see Vince's reaction. Mm-hmm. Does he look at it and say, okay, here we go, we got to change things up? Or does Vince say, well, fuck them? And I'll be honest, I want to see what Vince does that Wednesday night in retaliation. He's not going to let AEW go on. Vince does not do that. There is no way in hell Vince McMahon is going to let AEW go on scotch-free, okay? During the war, originally in the 80s with NWA and WWE was on syndication on Monday nights on USA,
And I remember they would be on Saturday mornings on Channel 5 and then Sunday mornings on Channel 5 over here. Okay, NWA was on Friday night at 10 o'clock on TBS and 8 o'clock on Saturday and then 6 o'clock on Sunday. So they weren't even going head-to-head TV-wise, except when Clash would go head-to-head with WrestleMania and the other pay-per-views like that. But outside of that, there was no head-to-head competition. But every time WCW ran a pay-per-view, NWA I should rather say, Vince would take his A show, which was Hogan and Savage and guys like that, and run them as late as possible to wear that crowd out for the live pay-per-view. So there's no way in hell Vince is going to let AEW go on TV on Wednesday night, October 2nd, and have nothing to show for it on Fox.
I'm going to say I bet a live NXT show is going to pop up advertised a couple of weeks before that show.
1,000%. And I'm hearing they want to do a hybrid NXT 205 type deal. He's not going to just let AEW go on TV by themselves.
Yeah,
there's no way, shape, or form Vince McMahon is ever going to let anybody go on TV in the wrestling industry without some sort of, oh yeah, you want to do that? Well, we're going to do this.
He's never done that.
Huh?
He's never done that.
And never will. And I'll tell you right now, if NXT is live that Wednesday night, I would not be shocked in the least bit.
I wouldn't be shocked if it's simulcast on FS1 as well, besides the network.
I would tell you right now, would it be shocked if they did what we originally said they were going to do, where the first hour is on FS1, and then the second hour goes right to the network.
And then the other thing we got to also remember at AEW is where are they going to go with this company? Yeah, we've seen, we've had our standalone shows and pay-per-views, but like we've said, it all is going to barrel down to the fact, what's your storylines going to be? Where do you want your stories to go? Where do you want your wrestlers to go? Where's this company heading? What is your end game, if you will, for AEW?
Well, it's going to take time. I think the first show is going to tell us a lot, but, we really can't see where they're headed. I think it's going to be, you got to give them a minimum. It's got to be a minimum 6 months to a year before you kind of get an idea of where they're going. And I think you need at least a good 2-3 year period to really see where they're headed. You understand what I'm saying? I think the first 6 months to a year, you'll get an idea of where they're going with this. But I think it's going to be a solid 2 to 3 year period where you can say, okay, they have their style, they figured it out. And then it comes down to, if Vince sees what they're doing and sees that's what the fans want, okay, he may bring that NXT quote-unquote style to the main roster, but that's not going to help so much when you're creative. It's still garbage. And the truth of the matter is, you've trained these guys in NXT on the WWE creative style. So there's going to have to be a lot of changes in order to get them off that style, so to speak. And that's going to take a lot of time. Vince and company have kind of really dug themselves in a hole with this, and I think AEW is going to pour some dirt on that hole. I don't think they're going to be dead and buried. They just have too much money to go away. But I think the WWE in its current form is going to have to change. I don't know if it's a change where, maybe Raw goes back to its roots of, I wouldn't say of attitude, but of ruthless aggression, and SmackDown's a cleaner show. Because I can't see Vince making SmackDown dirty, so to speak. It's a national show. It's a showcase show. It's his crown jewel, if you will. I mean, the sponsorship alone for that show, you're talking high-class sponsors. I can't see Vince turning dirty for that. You know what I'm saying?
Right. Plus, Fox ain't going to stand for that either. And now he's going to be answering to Fox. It's not just simple Vince doing what Vince wants. So, yeah, by dirty, you're talking going back to a NC-17 Attitude Era type show. But you're saying it's going to be more of a closer to PG-13 than it is to rated R.
Yeah, I don't see them going rated R or anything like that. But, at the same time, listen, Fox may say, fuck it, go for it. FX is, we've seen the shows on FX. Between Sons of Anarchy and Nip Tuck and Rescue Me and The Shield, those are some nasty shows. So, who knows? Fox may say, you know what, Vince, go turn it up. Have fun.
Yeah, but to be fair, we're also talking FX, a cable network, versus national television.
You got some risky shows on Channel 5 still if you actually pay attention.
So I don't know. I don't think I even watch any shows that are on Fox. Gotham's done, so I don't think I even watch Fox at all.
Yeah, you had some shows that definitely were a little more. Well, TV's changing though. You know, even your 2, 4, 7, and 5 are changing. You have shows that are much more risque. I think, maybe, 8 o'clock he has to keep it a little bit clean. Then maybe at 9 o'clock he turns it up a little bit. Who knows how they're going to do this. But he's not going to let AEW just say, hey, here we are, come watch us. So, yeah, a live NXT show that night would not shock me in the least bit.
Well, off the topic for a second.
A better one. I'll give you a better one. I can see Vince doing this. Not just running a live NXT show, running it in the Baltimore Arena.
Well, look what he did a couple weeks ago. New Japan had a show in Dallas. He ran the entire market a week before.
Yep.
And they got less than half in the arena because of it.
But that's what Vince does. You have to understand.
Yep.
I was listening to Meltzer. Meltzer was saying back in the 80s, whenever NWA, and early 90s also, whenever they would go and run a show, Vince on purpose, if you remember for a short time, WCW started running pay-per-views on Saturday instead of Sunday. They did it because Vince on purpose would run his A show on the Saturday before WCW pay-per-view. He'd start the show 8 o'clock at night they normally would. He would run past midnight. He'd give you a stacked 15-16 match show, and your main event would always be Warrior or Hogan or Savage, always a top guy, so he knew everyone would stick around. So imagine you got a whole entire wrestling crowd hyped up for a WWE product for 6-7 hours straight. Then they're going to come back the next night for a WCW product. They're going to be dead and worn out. Vince always did that. As a matter of fact, in 1985 or 86, he ran a show at the Met, which was the old arena in Minneapolis. And I looked at the date on it. It never occurred to me. The date he ran that was the date before AWA ran a huge show at the St. Paul Civic Center. He's been doing this since the time he took over. That's just what he does. So you know what? If he runs an NXT show in Baltimore versus an AEW show in D.C., I would not be shocked one iota.
So I know Meltzer said a few weeks ago that he doesn't think their AEW is going to fill 14,000 seats. But I think Brian Alvarez thinks it will. Are you more on the Meltzer side or the Alvarez side on that one?
Alvarez side. I think that first show, I told you, that's a major market. I think they're going to sell out. It's a major market. If they don't sell out, they're going to come close to it.
Were you surprised they went for such a major market right out of the gate? Or you think that's the best move to do?
I thought they were going to do Vegas. I knew they weren't going to do New York. I knew they weren't going to do Jersey or Connecticut, obviously. I thought maybe Vegas, maybe Miami, maybe Dallas. DC, I'm a little surprised about. That time of the year also, it's kind of a weird time. You kind of have football starting up and baseball's getting to the playoffs. But it's a Wednesday night, so football won't interfere with it too much. And college football won't interfere with it either, so it's a good night as far as that goes. I was thinking of I wouldn't say more of a major market, because DC is a pretty major market, but I was thinking along the lines of a Vegas, to be honest with you. But yeah, I'm fine with this. I think that if they don't sell out, they're going to come close to it.
I think if All Out wasn't happening the month before, they definitely would have gone for Chicago.
I could see that.
That seems to be that's going to be one of their home spots. I think between Vegas and Chicago, those are going to be they're like home places. Like they're not going to have it's not going to be New York and it's not going to be Atlanta, but I think between Chicago and Vegas, that's going to be AEW's, home turf.
I could see that. Chicago was always an AWA territory. Vince obviously took it from them, but that's not really one of its strongest markets, Chicago. Chicago is a very temperamental market when it comes to wrestling. So kind of like New York. Chicago, New York, not so much LA, but I find Chicago, New York, Boston, Philly, they're very temperamental markets. If you don't give us something to watch, we're not going to show up. Simple as that, as you're seeing now with the Raw show at MSG and the SmackDown show at MSG. I think that if you give us something to watch, we're going to show up. If you don't give us something to watch, we're not going to bother. The last Raw at the Coliseum was a lively crowd. I mean, even house shows, We used to go to house shows in the 90s. Remember how crazy those crowds were back then?
Yep.
That was a nothing. That crowd was asleep at the wheel the entire time. But that's just the way the product is right now. You're not giving the fans anything to really cheer about. My
There's no
question
story.
is AEW going to announce their card leading up to that first show?
Well, we've got 2 matches announced so far. Yesterday they announced Sammy Guevara is going to be facing Cody Rhodes.
Okay.
And today they announced a 6-man tag, The Elite, which is the Young Bucks and Kenny Omega, against Jericho and 2 mystery partners. And looking on, this isn't the back in the day. This is now, everyone's pretty much locked under some sort of deal, whether it be WWE, AEW, Impact, MLW. The only ones that I could see that are going to be out there by October is LAX. But I don't think they're going to move a needle by being Jericho's mystery partners.
I'll tell you what, if Jericho's mystery partners are Dean Ambrose, John Moxley and CM Punk,
That's
the roof would come off that place.
right, but Moxley's already signed there. Why make him a mystery partner? Why not just announce him to be part of member? You know what I mean?
They've done that before with guys that have been there. It's not a big deal.
And if you're going to have Punk come back, why not have him come back at All Out at Chicago?
Yeah, I mean, I don't see it being Punk. I could see Moxley as one of them. I mean, what if they pull a coup and sign Okada? That'd be huge.
Yeah, but the whole thing is, I just hope
I'm not a
it's
fan of
not.
Okada. To me, Okada's the Randy Orton of New Japan. I'm not a huge fan of Okada.
Oh, so you
But
think he's
I think that's a big enough international name where that could help things.
Naito? He's been looking to leave Japan.
Yeah, I mean, listen, New Japan, though, I mean, they play pretty lucratively, so we'll see what happens with that. But listen, I'm looking forward to AEW because, honestly, it's going to be a big shift in the wrestling business. Big shift. For the first time in, almost 20 years. You're talking over 18 years. You're about to have, I wouldn't even call it competition, but just an alternative to WWE on cable, live, on a major network. To me, Impact, as big as that was, they weren't live on a major. I mean, Spike wasn't. I mean, yeah, I guess major network, but they weren't live. I think they were live the first couple of weeks, and that was it, as far as I remember. Correct?
Impact, they were live for a minute, and then they went to tape because it got too expensive, and then they got kicked off of Spike.
Yeah, I mean, what happened with the Access deal, by the way?
I heard it fell through, and then I heard because apparently Anthem wanted to buy the network. It wasn't so much they wanted to put Impact on it. They were trying to buy it out from Cuban.
Interesting.
So I heard that the deal, from what I heard from PW Insider, is the deal is not 100% dead, but it's slowed down considerably. The interesting thing that happened last week was the fact that Corgan pulled NWA from ROH, and he's looking to build NWA up to having an hourly TV show, I guess, not on the internet.
Hey, listen, it's a good time to be a wrestling fan.
Yep.
I mean, this is really the first time in 18 years now you actually have good sustained options as opposed to WWE, and that's what we needed. But by the same token, there's something to be said for too much almost sometimes. And I think it's good we have all these companies. I just think when it's all said and done the next couple of years, I think it's going to revert back to where it was, where you're going to have 2 or 3 major companies, and that's all you're going to have. I don't think NWA is sustainable. I don't think MLW is sustainable. ROH, I think, is on its way out. I think they're on the last legs, to be honest with you. I mean, they're owned by a wealthy company, but I just don't see them as sustainable at this point. The interest just doesn't seem to be there anymore. I think Impact's going to survive. I think, obviously, AEW's going to survive and WWE's going to survive. I think it'll be those 3 battling it out.
Yeah, the ROH, from a creative standpoint, from a product standpoint, it's just not what it was even a year ago. And, they're saving grace is being owned by Sinclair, same way that Impact is lucky they're owned by Anthem.
Yeah. But you know what bothers me about New Japan is they had that show in Dallas. I was surprised it wasn't sold out.
Yeah, I think Meltzer said they only got about 4,500.
Yeah, a little surprised about that, but that
Yeah.
shows that, New Japan is as good as it is, it's not an American company. And, North American wrestling fans, we can deal with the occasional international wrestler, so to speak. Your luchadors, your Japanese guys, but that can't be the bulk of your roster. You understand what I'm saying?
Right.
We need those guys who speak English, shoot in English, and have classic North American gimmicks. You're gonna have Japanese guys that are gonna get over. You're gonna have lucha guys that are gonna get over, but that can't be the bulk of your federation. For us to really gravitate towards this, you got to give us, typical North American gimmicks, so to speak.
Well, I'm going to tell you this. You mentioned earlier in our conversation about them selling on MSG. I'm going to say they only sold on MSG because of the weekend they decided to run, which was WrestleMania weekend, where you had 80,000 wrestling fans converging on the area. I mean,
I'm going to say it's a combination of that, and it's also a combination of the New York crowd. The New York wrestling crowd has always been a little more sophisticated, dare I say, than the rest of the country's crowds, where we have more communication with the outside world. We kind of know a little more about what's going on with other wrestling federations. ECW started in Philadelphia, but they made it in New York. That's what kind of took them over the top, is when they finally got into New York and got those crowds in New York. And once you get in New York in any entertainment industry, so to speak, you've made it. And I think New Japan, they sold out because it was the New York crowd. That's really what it came down to.
And they're coming to Hammerstein actually in a couple of months.
Yeah, that'll sell out. That's small.
Yeah. Yep. And I want to just, as a WWE fan, I want to just thank AAA Wrestling, because as bad as WWE is selling tickets for MSG, AAA is doing even worse.
Really?
Yeah. AAA is running a show next month at MSG, and they've barely sold a quarter of the arena out.
But that goes back to what I was saying before. When it comes to the North American wrestling fans, if you give us nothing but Japanese guys and nothing but lucha guys, we're going to say thanks, but no thanks. You can give us a couple of lucha guys, obviously, a couple of Japanese guys, obviously, a couple of Canadian guys, obviously, but the bulk of your product has to be North American style gimmicks. Or else we're going to say thanks, but no thanks. That's just the way it goes. Am I wrong?
No, I completely agree with you.
The Luchas were huge in WCW. They weren't main eventing Nitro. They weren't main eventing Halloween Havoc. They weren't main eventing Thunder. You've had huge Japanese stars in the history of wrestling. How many of them have main evented major pay-per-views or main evented, Nitro or Raw or anything like that? There's a reason for it. We're into the North American gimmicks.
And I bet it would be reversed if going down to Mexico, they'd be more for the luchadors than they would for the North American gimmicks. And same thing with Japan; they'd be more for the Japanese guys. And you'll have your occasional guy who makes it big in Japan. Obviously, you have Vader, you have Stan Hansen. But in the end, it's the home country advantage. That's how it's always going to be, no matter what.
Well, I look at it like this. When WWE goes to Europe, they sell out all over the place because they go there once a year. When they go to Japan, they sell out because they go there once a year. Mexico, same thing, once a year. So when you go somewhere once a year and you're the biggest company in the world, you're going to get that sellout. But I can guarantee if WWE went to Japan 3 or 4 weeks in a row, they may not sell out so much after a while.
Correct. I fully agree.
But, to sum it up, I think we both can agree at this point, the wheels have fallen off this company. The product has got to change. There's no two ways about it.
Do you think that change is going to come with Fox? I mean, if they're pulling numbers like they are for Raw now on Fox, Fox isn't going to sit around and just be okay with it like USA might be.
I'll agree with that.
So
they're going to have to change. Like I said, I don't see it being a drastic change as far as violence and language and adult themes go. I think the change is going to be in ring, where they adopt more of a NXT style of wrestling, so to speak. I don't think they're going to do the classic indie AEW, ROH, New Japan stiff style, but I could see him going to an NXT style more, where the matches are a little more faster paced. That's kind of where I see them heading with that.
Well, that's my whole thing. The fact that you have guys who are literally sitting in the back before a show going through every single spot is not a way that wrestlers in the day got through matches. I rewatched the Flair Steamboat Classic this week, the 3 matches. They went through a 1-hour match on Clash of the Champions, and they called every single spot in the ring. They didn't go back and go over a single spot at all. I mean, and then, you know what? And then the reverse is that Savage Steamboat, Savage went through every single thing meticulously, and it was still a classic too. So, I mean,
the funny thing about that match, they actually had that match rehearsed to go 45 minutes because they didn't think Andre can go that long, and to keep the show going as long as possible, Vince had them rehearse it as a 45-minute match. It was actually that day that Vince and Pat told them to chop it down to 15 minutes, believe it or not.
Can you imagine they went 45 at WrestleMania?
Can you imagine anything going 45 anymore?
Yeah. I got to tell you, Terry Funk was great. I'm just kidding with you, Rick. I'm just kidding. The end of that, when he was in the ring, and then that stiff, and Jim Ross. I'm sorry, that's how Jim Ross was great. Look at the way his neck turned on that pile driver. I mean, that
was a table spot in 1989. That was unheard of back then. And you had table spots before that. I remember Randy Savage pile drove Ricky Morton through a table back in like 83 or 84. Harley Race got put through a table accidentally. Saturday Night's Main Event against Hogan. But you never had a guy on a major pay-per-view for a major company getting pile driven through a freaking table. Definitely not Ric Flair, at least.
And he sold it. He wore a neck brace around Charlotte.
Oh, yeah.
I understand kayfabe was a lot more, prevalent back in '89, but still to sell that like that. And I believe Ric Flair was off TV. I think, what did Jim Ross say? I think he said the following Clash of the Champions was the first time he wasn't part of it. Or something like that.
Flair was actually booking at this point, believe it or not.
So, yeah, but '89 was really good for NWA. I'm going back and watching some of that stuff, and I'm enjoying that.
That, I could say, was probably the peak of the NWA style. Whereas I've always said, the peak of the 80s for the WWF, I think the peak of wrestling in the 80s was really 1989. If you look at both companies, that was kind of like your peak of wrestling. I think summer of '89 was one of the best times in wrestling history, just from a pure in-ring standpoint. You didn't have great angles, so to speak, from both companies, but the in-ring work from both companies was outstanding. That to me was really the epitome of your 80s style wrestling right there. I think the WWE style, was during Ruthless Aggression around 05, 06 when you saw that come to its apex, so to speak.
But going back to my point is, I just think if they loosen the reins a bit, I mean, yeah, I understand you're going to script a bunch of guys with their promos. You want them to study what they're going to be. But I think as far as from an in-ring standpoint, if you loosen the reins a bit and let them call some spots in the ring and trust your talent to be able to produce a good match, I think the style and the reaction from the fans are going to be completely different.
But I think you can only do that with certain guys. There were certain guys I honestly would not trust with that. I think you can trust Bray Wyatt, AJ Styles, Samoa Joe. Would you trust Roman Reigns off script?
I would. If we're talking in a match, maybe not. I don't think he's a ring general like that to be able to do it. But a guy like Cesaro, I mean, I know you don't like him, but a guy like Rey Mysterio, I think he'll be trusted to do that. I mean, granted, he might be a little older that he'll botch a move just because he's older and those knees aren't great. But a guy like Cesaro, Bray, like you said, Bray Wyatt, Randy Orton, I think you'd be able to trust. I think you could let Kofi and Randy Orton at SummerSlam go without it being completely scripted and produced.
I would trust Andrade. I'll tell you who I wouldn't trust, Seth Rollins.
Yeah, Seth seems a bit, I don't know, maybe the pressure's getting to him. I don't know. Like I said, is that him? Is that WWE Creative trying to be cute on his Twitter? I mean,
how does it sound to you? Seth Rollins loses at SummerSlam and just disappears for a little while and comes back. I think he needs a little bit of a tweaking. I don't think he needs a gimmick overhaul, but he needs to be tweaked. I think he needs to come back as a real cocky heel.
He needs to get injured and be out till about November.
I'd say even longer. I'd keep him out to Royal Rumble. Let him come back as a real cocky heel. And, I mean, here's an idea. Maybe throw him back with Roman, let them both be a heel, and maybe let them run with the Shield again as a two-man crew, kind of like the way Triple H and HBK ran with DX in 97. Make him cocky, make him conceited, make him talk a lot of shit. I think Roman and Seth Rollins are better off as heels than anything else, to be honest with you.
We're talking about Roman. What the hell was that crap at the end of SmackDown last night? I'm sorry, but did that not have Eric Bischoff's fingerprints on it or not?
I'll tell you, Kayla Braxton, her acting made it so funny. Come on.
Roman, watch out.
She made it worthwhile. She's so cute. Come on.
But I'm just saying.
Honestly, I think she's one of the few. Like, Charlie Caruso does nothing for me. I find her annoying as hell, especially on ESPN. The other blonde I really don't care for. Renee Young, I don't care for. I think Kayla Braxton actually adds to the product. I actually want to see her out there more often. I think she's funny. I think she's so bad, it's almost like a B movie. You have to watch it.
Yeah, speaking of B movies, that ending, which I'm sorry, to me, that was completely Eric Bischoff type stuff. That was like who's driving the white limo on Nitro type stuff. And it's funny because he was talking about on his podcast either this week or the week before about having angles that make you want to come back, cliffhangers. To me, that was an Eric Bischoff cliffhanger to try to have people come back on next week's SmackDown to see who it was.
You know what, though? I mean, it almost brings me back to when, Austin got ran over by a car, and he did it for The Rock.
For The Rock.
He did it for the people. I mean, if Samoa Joe pops up and says that, God help me. I mean, how many angles are we going to rehash from 1999?
And what if it's Rikishi? Well, Rikishi should pop up and do it.
Speaking of which, Rikishi did not look healthy the last time he was on TV.
He hasn't looked healthy in 20 years, let's be real.
Yeah. So now I'm hearing it's his name that did it, the Cruiserweight.
Yeah, I heard they were talking about that he was in the background. It was Buddy Murphy. But so let's get this straight. You pulled Buddy Murphy from 205 Live 3 months ago. He hasn't been on TV once, and he's attacking Roman. Yeah, that's not going to be a one-sided match at all.
But even Cedric Alexander, what is he doing up here? What is he doing with the Drew McIntyre feud? I mean, come on, man. Drew McIntyre is going for the world title at this point.
Yep. Hey, you know what? Maybe he should attack Seth before SummerSlam, put on Seth's gear with the music, come out, and no one will tell the difference because it's just a guy with long hair and a beard.
I would not be shocked if Drew wins the Royal Rumble in 2020.
I could see that, especially with Paul running Raw. I mean, I don't even know what show Drew is part of, to be honest with you.
Well, he's on every show apparently every week.
Yeah.
I mean, him and Roman are on every show, and so is Samoa Joe. Who else on every show these days?
New Day.
Usos.
I think that's... I'm going to tell you, I think that's going to be I think once October hits, they're going to go back to a hard split.
They have to.
I think they're just doing it. I think there's going to be a change once they get to October, not only because of AEW, but because of their Fox deal. I think you're going to see something happen. I think there might, okay, I'll say I'm hoping right now they're just writing things out until October. I mean, this is the second week in a row I heard that Vince totally rewrote the script on a Tuesday morning for SmackDown.
It has to get better. It honestly, like I said, the wheels have fallen off. It can't get worse. It's in a hospice. This style is dying. And it's dying a slow death for the last 11 years. I think at this point, though, the fans have gotten really... me as a fan, I'm sick of it. Honestly, I can't deal with it anymore. It's gotten that bad to me.
Last thing I wanted to talk about, and I'm going to take you to task with something because I know you're a big Meltzer fan, is something he said on Tuesday morning. He referred to Vince's line at the call about, we're not going to be blood and guts. And then he's going to say that the selling of the attack on Seth Rollins, with Seth Rollins implying internal bleeding from the packet in his mouth, is more blood and guts than Joey Janela being slammed through barbed wire.
I get what he was saying. I mean, listen, people, I heard what he said. People in combat sports, they bleed from the head all the time. Guys bleed from their eyes, their eyebrows, the head. It's not a big deal. When someone is spitting up blood, now you're kind of taking it to that different level. Now it's basically like their life is on the line, so to speak. You understand what I'm saying? So I think that's basically where he's coming from with that, which I kind of sort of agree with that. I mean, somebody getting their head busted open, no big deal. We've seen it 1,000 times. When somebody starts spitting up blood, it's like, oh, okay, this is a little more serious than we thought. You know what I'm saying?
But that's the whole point. You're supposed to sell the seriousness. Remember on Superstars when Yokozuna attacked Hacksaw and gave him like 3 Banzai splashes and Hacksaw was coughing up blood? That wasn't considered blood and guts back then.
You know what? Different times, I think people have become much more sensitive to it, and I think people generally are annoyed with the WWE product. I think we're at a point now where it's like, we've seen this product be good. There's no reason why a multi-billion-dollar company should be struggling right now. This is the deepest roster, I wouldn't say in the history of the company. In my eyes, I think the deepest roster they ever had was probably, I want to say probably in the middle of Ruthless Aggression around, I want to say between 05 and 07, somewhere in there. Maybe I'm wrong, but that seems to me to be the deepest this company's roster ever was. But it's definitely a deep roster.
Problem is, it's quantity over quality.
I agree.
You could have 300 wrestlers on your roster, but if a 20th of them are decent and everyone else is not, what's the point of having 300 people?
While we're sitting here talking, I'm actually watching the ECW show from Queens that had the Blizzard going on at the same time. And I just watched the Eliminators win the tag titles from Mikey Whipwreck and Cactus Jack. And I'm just watching this match, and I'm thinking to myself, my God, you see nothing close to this right now in WWE.
No.
It wasn't a violent match. It wasn't a violent match. It was a standard tag team match. Typical, one partner doesn't like the other partner, but they're tag champions, versus an up-and-coming tag team. So the distraction was there, so to speak. But this was a standard wrestling tag team match. Didn't have the blood and guts of the violence, but it was just a great match. Psychology, the angle, everything about it was just perfect. And you just don't see this anymore.
You definitely do not. And I hope we see more ring psychology with AEW. I mean, I get the Young Bucks are kind of a high spot tag team, but I want to see some more ring psychology. Speaking of which, who from the 80s would you think was one of the best ring psychologists from the NWA?
Flair, Tully, Arn.
Go back. Tully Blanchard. He is officially now managing Sean Spears in AEW, and they announced at All Out it will be Cody Rhodes against Sean Spears with Tully Blanchard in the corner.
You know, I brought it up to you yesterday about Tully Blanchard. To me, I'd love to meet the guy and ask him the question because it's one of the great mysteries in wrestling history. He failed a drug test in WWE. They were basically, the story that I heard is they were quitting WWE to go back to WCW, and before they left, they got given a drug test, and Tully, of course, failed. How many guys have failed multiple drug tests in wrestling, beaten up promoters, beaten up their wives, got into car accidents drunk, got caught with drugs, and still found their way back into a roster? This guy failed one drug test, and you never heard from him again, basically. I think he had one more match in WCW on a Legends Reunion type deal at Slamboree. He had a match in ECW against Shane Douglas, which was an hour-long Broadway, one of the most boring matches ever. And that was it. And that guy was a major player in the 80s.
I wonder if he burned a bridge on his way out to WWF.
He had to have burned a couple of bridges because nobody wanted him ever again. So I don't understand how a guy like that fails one drug test for coke. We're talking late 80s. Who wasn't doing coke back then in wrestling? I mean, shit. They have a video with Hawk snorting lines before he goes out to a match during the Great American Bash 87. So, I mean,
if Randy Savage wasn't doing coke before a promo, then he had more problems than we thought.
I mean, that guy wasn't, yeah, seriously, that guy was as coked up as it got. But it's just, it's astonishing to me that this guy was never given a chance ever again. So something had to have happened. But, you know, listen, I'm glad he's back. I'm glad he found some work in the wrestling industry. I think he's one of the great minds in the history of wrestling. I mean, to this day, his first blood match against Magnum TA, you want to talk about ring psychology? You're not going to find a better ring psychology than that.
You know, I'm excited about something. In the weekend of the 23rd, we're having our first road podcast.
That's right. Live from Ocean City.
We're going to be in Ocean City, Maryland, the weekend of the 23rd. We're going to record together in the same room. Well, we might be on the beach, but you know what? We're going to be in the same place at the same time, not through Skype. It'll be the first show we're doing together since our inaugural show at WrestleMania weekend. And we're going to be doing it from Ocean City, Maryland.
I am looking very forward to this.
And who knows? That might be a round robin battle royal podcast.
Oof.
We might have a lot of people on that podcast that day.
Some old wrestling fans, some new wrestling fans. That could be a very interesting podcast.
And you know who can't escape and give excuses for that one? Your brother.
That's right.
He has no excuse not to be part of that cast.
My brother will be joining us.
And what's the best place to find us?
Take it away, my friend.
WillYouStopPodcast.com, the one-shop stop for everything that is us. Our social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, our official website, everything is on there. Our link to our YouTube channel where these videos are posted every single time. This is now episode 14. We're almost into the 20s already in our amount of shows. So, I mean, we got kind of a slow month coming up until the weekend of the 10th. Then I guess our next show will be before that. So our next show, we're going to actually preview SummerSlam. Yeah.
Yeah, that's going to be a tough one. Well, listen, you know, I've always been a fan of SummerSlam. I've always liked the Royal Rumble, but something about SummerSlam has always been a fun thing for me. Historically, SummerSlam has always been fun. Speaking of which, I think I sent you the card. SummerSlam 95. People, if you ever want to hurt yourself, go watch SummerSlam 95. Easily the worst card in the history of wrestling, possibly.
Would that be the worst main event in the history of wrestling? On a major pay-per-view?
Mabel versus Diesel. I'm going to say this again. Mabel versus Diesel. A match that literally had no hope.
The guy who was supposed to be the third man versus the guy who was the second man in the NWO.
I mean, literally no hope for that to be a good match. There are some matches you look at, you think to yourself, okay, this can be a good match. Okay, there was literally no hope for that match from beginning to end.
Well, that's going to wrap it up for this week. I think I'm enjoying this new way we're doing our podcast. You know, it's very accessible for our viewers on YouTube to see us now. It's easily for me to get the audio onto our podcast broadcast partners, and I think things are going well.
Absolutely, and now we get to look at your beautiful face the entire time.
Oh, excuse me.
Don't get too excited now.
I'm sorry. You excited me when, you said that.
I'm going to tell you how beautiful you are.
Yeah. But that's going to wrap it up for this week. I'm Brandon.
And I'm Avi. We'll see you guys next time.
See you.